are now listening to Talking Transparency, the podcast where transparents talk transparently, hosted by Cody Connor and Melissa Luxon.
Welcome back, listeners, to Talking Transparency, the podcast where transparents talk transparently. I'm Melissa.
I'm Cody.
And I'm Thea.
And we have Jessica Gurley today.
Hi.
All right, Jessica Gurley. So we have you as our guest today. It's awesome having you in the studio.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Very excited. We are here wanting to talk about your organization. Thea, would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Jessica will tell us a bit, but I know that we had the privilege, the Kalos Coalition did, of attending your 757 Trans Family workshops that you were hosting last year, and I think you're planning to host it throughout this year.
Yes.
And I know that you are an amazing advocate for trans youth, that you have been a volunteer with the LGBT Life Center for years, and just absolutely a wonderful gem of the community. So tell us a bit more about yourself now that you've rolled out the red carpet.
Thank you. Yes. So I am a parent of a trans child and non-binary child. And I started 757 Trans Family because when they came out to me, or when my son specifically came out to me, even with my women's and gender studies background, I was still kind of clueless as to what to do and how to support him and what this meant and all of the things. Mm-hmm. And so fast forward to me being in school for my master's program, and this is what I decided to kind of do my research on and find out how to support these parents, how to support, help them learn and gain knowledge and resources and access to resources. So, yeah.
And have community.
Yes.
Because that's
very much the community.
Right.
And forming a family, you know,
right.
and that's what I hope to do. My goal is to be able to talk, like when parents are just kind of like, what do I do? I've had a lot of friends that have been like, hey, can they talk to you? And I'm like, yes, absolutely, mm-hmm. please. And so that's kind of what fueled it. It's like, you know, I want to be able to talk to you, and then I want to have parents that talk, other parents that can talk to parents, because I can't answer all the questions. I can't, you know, be in all of, you know, I'm not BIPOC. I'm not, mm-hmm. You know, there's so many things that I'm not, that other people can give much information to, that I would love to have other parents come in and join me and just be a conversation.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
What have you found in talking with other parents and doing your classes has been kind of the biggest challenge other parents have, the biggest pushback? I went to one of your things, and I remember there was one father in there, and you know, obviously he was there, so mm-hmm. he was you know doing.
He wanted to learn.
He wanted to learn. Right, yeah. He was doing what you would ask of him to do. He wanted to learn. But you could tell that there was still a couple things he was really struggling with, like namely feeling like he was putting his child in danger. Yes.
And a lot of times the medical stuff comes up first. You know, these are going to be permanent. You know, will I have grandchildren? Will I, you know, and that's that
the
question. Will I,
right?
Yes, absolutely
mm-hmm.
is the question that it's like, okay, so is it still about you, or is it about your kid? You know, mm-hmm. who are we talking about here? And so a lot of times the questions that come up are so many of those, and it's like really kind of helping them reflect on what it's about. What's the question mm-hmm. about? It is about your needs or your child's needs right now. So.
Right.
Well, and like that was one of the ones, you know, because I thought about that. I really try and listen, you know, to people's concerns, to where they're coming from, meet them where they are. And like that, you know, I thought about, you know, some of the things that father had said for a little while, you know, just kind of, you know, because I absolutely can understand that mm-hmm. thought of putting your child in danger and all of those. But I think, you know, the conclusion that I really came to thinking about it when I really thought about it is it's like so many other things attached to the trans community. It's not really about putting your child in danger. It's about that uncomfortability and everything that you have with these things, your ability to understand.
Yeah.
And because of your inability to necessarily understand, that fear mm-hmm. that causes you, that kind of fear of the unknown. Because, you know, when you think about putting your kid in danger, I mean, how many hundreds, thousands of kids are injured every year playing sports.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Going
right.
to school
Nobody-
each day and coming home with a black eye.
Permanently
Yeah.
injured some of them every
If
year
they come
in
home,
sports.
unfortunately, in American schools, I hate to bring that up to the parents, but
Yeah.
it's hard.
Yeah. And you think of all of these other scenarios where people in a lot of ways are actually proud to put their children into danger.
Because if they can get out of it, then they're that much better.
Well,
American
What better
exceptionalism.
it's just about what it's attached to and how comfortable you are on it and how you've been conditioned through your life to accept certain things.
Mm-hmm.
There's no problem sending your child into the military. How much more danger can you put somebody in? How much more
Correct.
possible permanent harm
Right.
can you support your child going into?
But now all of a sudden you care about danger.
Yeah, but you'll find those bumper stickers all over the place. I'm a proud parent of a Marine. I'm a proud parent of a Navy, and nothing against them. I'm just saying it's the same thing.
Yep.
That's the same thing. Same thing as sending your kid out in that football field.
Right. Or letting your kid get a driver's license.
Yeah,
That's super scary.
I
Even
mean,
you know,
hello.
and it's not just we attach a lot of those things to just our men and our boys in society. But you know what the second most dangerous sport is? The sport that accounts for the second most injuries outside of football?
Field hockey?
Ooh, girls soccer.
Soccer.
Oh, I believe that. I had an injury from girls soccer. Yeah.
And so it's not, it's really nothing about actually being uncomfortable with putting our children in danger.
No.
Well,
It's just how we've been conditioned to
Right.
accept the danger that we're putting our children in.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. That's, there's certain dangers that we as parents know is going to happen. So when this new one comes up, it's like, whoa, I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't given the book to
Right.
figure out how to do this.
Right.
So-
if actually every time that this subject has been broached in my entire life leading up to this point, it's been completely avoided in any constructive scenario. And so completely uneducated on what to do, most people.
Absolutely.
And it's difficult also as a trans person, and I went through this with my own parents, understanding that fear and that the weight that fear has on your child or on the trans person that's coming out in your life. Because while you may be afraid for them, and we're talking, because you talk about soccer, you talk about football, we can talk about the dangers of driving, but then, those are sort of seen as externalities that aren't controllable, while being trans is seen as this like somehow choice. It's not a choice.
Right.
And the fear seems to, from the outside perspective, as a child who's been in that conversation, hurt.
Right.
It hurts because, like you said, it's centered in it's centered in what the expectations of the parents are, and it's not addressing the child right there. But if I could give any advice to my trans sibs, is to expect the fear, because rather than have it smack you in the face and hurt, and like, what do you mean you're afraid for me? You should be happy for me, because that's what you would hope in an ideal world, that you come out to your parents and you say, hey, this is who I am, and they accept you. And there's all sorts of different expectations folks have. But I think that if you prepare yourself for that fear, the worst case scenario is that a lot of their reactions, even if you can't process or find space for it, hopefully you can find space that it was the fear that rooted those words, the reaction.
Yeah.
Because most reactions in our lives are emotionally driven.
Absolutely.
Fear is a big one.
And fear, I think what we need to talk about is, as a parent, we think we have a lot of control over our children. We think, right?
Some people are foolish enough to think.
Right. I mean, okay, fair, but I mean, but we sign the permission slips. We sign them up for school. We control their movement when they're children. Okay. We also have a hand in controlling who harms our children. And I think too, when your child comes out as LGBTQIA+ to their family, as a mother, I know, I think we've talked about this, I think, on a different podcast, where I had, for the first time asked my adult trans child to consider taking their flag down from their house because they live in an area, and because of the way tensions have been and things have been, as a mother, I am so scared for my child right now, who is an adult and can make these decisions for themselves. But but there is a fear of how others will treat our children. And when, they come out as LGBTQ plus, immediately this fear of how others are going and treat them, right? And how difficult this path will be because of how our society is structured. And so there is that fear. And I think that should be part of consideration when we kind of our initial reaction sometimes. And then comes the selfish part, right? So it's how others will treat them, but then we don't take into consideration. We're like, oh, and how am I going to tell my friends? Mm-hmm. Right. And so then you get selfish about your fears about how other people, and then you're like, I just, don't want to have this conversation with my friends or my family, or we can tell everybody but grandpa,
Right.
And navigating those limits is difficult. But as you said, it's not the same as a soccer, it's playing
right.
women's soccer, playing football, because it is that sort of, someone's going to attack me. You're not going to get hate crimes doing something like getting your driver's license necessarily, or a learner's permit. But when you come out and say who you are, you're right. It's not just the danger, but then it's the loss of opportunity. Mm-hmm. A lot of things that aren't discussed is, losing access to certain family members. Yes. For better or worse, sometimes means losing access to history. Mm-hmm. Never mind financial resources, never mind the social support, right. Literal history of who, and sometimes that's a necessary break. And depending on who you're talking to, some trans folks, they want to reclaim their identity, remake their identity, or start an entire new identity based off of those factors and myriad more that we could even go into. But right. it really does start to how do we deal with that fear, and then how do we get past it as a community. And then once you start focusing on that, the question isn't how can I stop my fear, even it's what can I do to make the world safer for my child. Mm-hmm. And this is an area, as I look over around the faces of the parents in the room, this is something that parents are constantly contending with. Mm-hmm. Yes. This is something we all are.
I mean, and it's really, a lot of that is about your relationship with fear. Because most of us are conditioned to have a certain relationship with fear, pain and pleasure, just that whole thing. And the relationship is not a relationship. It's basically a rejection of one and almost an obsession with the other in so many ways. And so usually rather than living with our fear, understanding it, really embracing it and what motivates it, and just accepting that it's there and that it's motivating us, right? Most people just want to either completely deny its existence or do everything they can to think they've annihilated its existence. One of the two, but not actually develop a relationship in it. And mostly what that happens, what that ends up happening in those cases is you have people that basically still living in fear, still completely motivated by their fear all the time, but completely denying that it exists and that that's what's motivating them.
And I'll go beyond the denying. That's the key word. We're talking about denial here, but in that act of denial, they're also surrendering their agency.
That's exactly right.
The ability to grapple with what that means, and then also take active steps in your life, in your community, to make it safer. Because when we talk about this fear, we can talk about the solution. Should we keep my child in the closet? Should I do this? Should I not tell grandpa? Or should we instead work harder to make sure our society, our public spaces are safer for our kids and for the most vulnerable in our community?
Well, when you deny what's motivating you, you're not making an actual free decision. Right. Mm-hmm. You're not making a decision with real information and real honesty. And so you're not making an actual free agency decision. You're just making a reactionary decision that you've convinced yourself isn't. Right. And that's a big part of it, is we want to just do things to get rid of that fear instead of just accept that it's there, accept that it's motivating us and it's influencing our decisions, and learn how to live with that. We want life to be one solid emotion. Mm-hmm. We want to just be happy all the time, and that's not life. No. And trying to live like that and trying to form your thoughts and perspectives around a concept like that doesn't allow you to make truly real, informed, truthful decisions. And that's a big part of what I think a lot of parents need to ask themselves too, is when you have that fear, first of all, where was that fear before, right? Because as a parent, one thing you should be very familiar with, if you're a good parent, is gut-wrenching, paralyzing fear.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
The
that
moment
is,
they take a breath.
there's not a good parent in the world that is not deeply familiar with that kind of fear.
And it doesn't stop, Cody, because we never stop. Like I just was crying before a trip because my adult child was out of the country and I was leaving the country. And it was the first time ever. And I was having so much anxiety and fear for her. Mm-hmm. And she's 23.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's, I have the same thing. I have a 24-year-old. My oldest is 24. And I have that same worries, same fears. But I acknowledge that they're me. All of those things that I want for her, I'm always going to want more better for every single one of my children.
More better.
Always. And that's not me thinking less of them in any way. It's just, as a father, I'll always want more. They become the president of the United States. I'm going to want them to become the president for a second term and be the best president ever. And that's just how I'm always going to be. But I accept that that's me. Those are my desires and my visions of what that may look like for them. But what that actually looks like for them is them.
That part.
And I 100% accept that.
We have to, because
you don't have a choice, but people that don't, you struggle more with everything when you just don't accept the reality of the situation.
Yes, if you're in such denial that you're going around saying that your child is, president of Mars, that requires intervention. But what do you think, Jessica? How do parents confront this denial?
It's a difficult dichotomy because, yes, we have the fear, but if you're a supportive parent from the beginning, you also have that joy. And, and you have the joy and you want to celebrate and you want to, be there with them in that space. But at the same time, you don't want them putting on those rose-colored glasses. Like, this is going to be difficult. This is going to make life challenging for you every step of the way. And, and for me and my son, it's something that we're constantly talking about. Like, where are you right now with this? And, even before I came here, I checked in with both of them. And because I do, I mentioned in the workshop, each time I'm going to talk about them, I make sure it's okay with them.
How old are they? I'm sorry.
13 and 18.
13, 18. Okay.
And, and so it's just, it really is one of those things where each individual parent has to figure out how to let their child have agency and let them have their autonomy and just, okay, I see you as an individual. I have these emotions for you. What are you feeling? And how can I be in that space with you? And so, and it's one of those things that, yes, there are so many parents that have this desire for their kids and have this vision for their kids. And once that's changed, their life is done. They're defeated. Right. And it's no, you are not celebrating this child that just did something that nobody else in your family has done.
Right.
Oh my God.
Because as a culture, we literally raise our children to, it's almost like, well, yes, I want my kids to be successful in those things, but I actually just really want my kids to be happy. And I think we all want our kids to be happy. And it's funny because the same thing Cody's saying, I say, but the way I say it is I have no expectations of my kids. That does not translate to low expectations.
Right.
That just is no expectations. You don't want to have kids. You want to have kids. I don't have any expectations. It's your life.
Yeah.
I had a lot of friends when my kids were, teenagers that I didn't have the same forceful hand with homework and, school and things like that. I wanted them to do their work, but I was like, listen, I got my job. I got my life. You are in control of that. You have agency over your life. You make decisions for what's going to be best for you. And you decided that you don't want to do any of your homework and you want to get back grades in school. I mean, nobody here is quiet about the results of that, right? But we'll support you in what you want to do. And I mean, that was enough for my kids were like, oh, I don't want to disappoint. But through those, through having, I just think that too many parents have all these expectations of their kids for what their kids are going to provide them. And then it's like earth shattering if you deviate at all from societal process. And my question for you was about religion. How much do you think with your trans families that you meet, I'm sure the questions, and support levels vary on a scale from the parents who attend. How much of it is just dealing with some folks that are really rooted in that religion, and how much of it is just general societal, do you think?
So I can't say that I have been in it long enough to have like a data set.
Yeah, sure.
speak.
Yeah.
But in my experience, there is a lot of. So my mother is a pastor,
okay,
Methodist pastor, and so there's a lot of learning. There's a big learning curve, and and so the religion is there. I don't know if I would say has more pull than the society pull. Just because they're so integrated from day one, like our history before we were born, like we've already been decided.
That's right.
And, and so I feel there's actually a lot of, in my opinion, a lot of the media shows the extremes.
Of course.
Shows the extreme religious people, and they hate transgender people, and there's no hope for them. And that's just not the case. Most of the just regular old Christian or other religious people, want people to live their best lives, and they want to love their neighbor, and and it's so difficult to find those people outside of the queer community because our algorithms and everything is set up so that we talk to the queer community and we market to the queer community, and there's so many people in the religious groups that just don't have the education,
right?
And it's not that they want that they hate anybody or that they want to see things go a different way. It's just simply that they don't know. And, and so I would like to eventually be able to work with churches and just education workshops with them specifically so that they can just have the knowledge and how, like our sex ed doesn't talk about it. Our, so much of the education just leaves the whole gender thing as a binary and that's it. And so where would they get the education other than looking it up on Google and stuff like that the parents do when we're trying to figure it out.
Right.
And so.
There's a lot of misinformation out in the media about the, trans youth, about trans adults. And I think that where I would push back a little bit is we've probably seen more outward hate, for lack of a better word, towards the trans community just in the last 2 to 3 years, where it's just been so visible.
2020, 2021,
right.
2022,
and
more and more.
Right. And
every year breaks the record.
Right. And every year more and more. Exactly. And I think the more that it gets talked about, the more people start to they push back. It's that rage, right? We start to see, some pushback on it, and it's rooted in fear. But I mean, it is getting pretty aggressive.
I think it's really important that when we talk about religion and trans identities, that we do not talk about them as if they're two separate groups, because most of the trans folks that I know, if not most, like a healthy portion, are religious in some way, shape, or form, and have had to either lead reconciliations within their own churches. We had a trans wish come in from, it's very anonymous, the list, but they came in, and there's part of their story was talking about how they, as a youth and going through their non-binary journey, was able to help lead that I don't want to misquote it, but being able to lead that sort of reform inside their church. And beyond that, I know that the MCCs here locally, I know that there are lots of New Life churches. There are lots of churches that make the effort. Unitarian churches and such that, but then even beyond
Methodist
that,
too, I think is
Methodist sometimes if they have been reformed or reconciled or something like that. But regardless, my issue here is that beyond all of that, and we can talk about the safe space and the work to be done, is that, that was my same impulse. I want to be working with these churches. I want to be going into these spaces and community spaces because they're shared spaces. A lot of times there's always sorts of things that are going on, so we can have these conversations and be present. As a trans person, I feel like one of the most radical acts I can do is show up, and be there and then have those conversations and let those parents and those people, those community members see we're just normal people. Right. We're just living our lives. But when I tried to show up at these churches, and I went through a process for several months before I started the Kalos Coalition, I struggled to actually find safety or find, and even in the few places that I was able to find, pastors willing to meet with me or discuss with me, their willingness to actually open up resources, because we're talking about organizations that just have to declare themselves 501c3. They don't have to apply for anything. They have, substantial community resource things. Like, we just wanted to have a shared space. I remember, Cody, when we first started this, we actually gave you some numbers of all these different churches to see. Yes. And they actually wanted to charge us $300, $400 for, simply just using the space so that we could even host a trans family dinner. And we had better luck working with breweries and other private entities and things and some of this really comes down to not the individual hearts and minds. And I have to stress this so much, but the doctrine and the fear.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about the boards or the administrative organizations within a church, it's a man-made institution. It's built upon, a foundation of faith, sure, but it's built by men, not to be overly gendered here. But at the same time, if we don't confront that those edifices that have been built are specifically on the bodies of queer people who were scapegoated, whose bodies were said were unproductive, whose lives were devalued, we can't hope to reconcile, especially when I try as a trans person in the community to reach out with those olive branches and I find them being knocked away. Now, that's not to say that there aren't churches that are willing to work with us, and that work needs to be done. But it's a two-way street. And I do not find, in my experience, that it's a lack of trans people doing that work. I mean, I could talk about trans pastors in the community, people who are doing amazing things. But at the same time, if we don't have those spaces opened and welcome, if we're still treated as if we're some sort of abomination, as if we're a danger, just being visible to children, we can't even go in those spaces and be safe.
Right.
And, talk about where we're going to have problems in parking lots. Is it going to be in a brewery, or is it going to be going out after Sunday service? Are you going to be followed? And those are the things that I don't think a lot of Christians contend with. Personally, and this conversation's hard because I don't want to demonize my neighbors.
Right, absolutely.
I'm not a Christian myself, but I know that there's a lot of Christians I love, and I don't want that hate to grow in my heart. So I hope that they will try to address the hate in their heart. But Cody, you look like you want to say something.
I mean, it's just a strange concept for me to understand, because even from the lens, I was raised Christian, religious, until I read too many books and started asking too many questions.
Same.
And so I'm very, very familiar, not just even with several different doctrines. And one of the things that I just never really understood is that everybody sins, right? Quote unquote, everybody sins. And all of the other sinners walk up to church and are welcomed in and shake the pastor's hand and we're glad you're here and all of those things. And so even if strongly held belief, you're living your life wrong, you're sinning in the eyes of God, just like everybody else, where then is the justification for treating one person differently for their sin than you would treat somebody else? How can you hate somebody for having a different sin than you? And so that's really the most difficult thing for me, because I very much understand. I understand even the concept of the driving force behind so many monotheistic and Christian religions to proselyte and recruit, and even in some of the most best conversations. And when we had at one of the dinners recently, in the end, always came down to, well, I understand, but I just really hope you will accept Jesus into your life the way that I have and have the same beliefs as me eventually. And that's what I really hope, that the words I've spoken to you sink in and that happens to you.
Because Sodom and Gomorrah.
And that is always the sub theme of any of those conversations. I haven't had one that really isn't.
Does everybody know that Sodom and Gomorrah was only about their rape culture that they had, that it was about the atrocities of rape?
Mm-hmm.
It had nothing to do with anybody, like it didn't have anything to do with same-sex relations. It was,
Really?
Right.
yes, it was the
See-
atrocities that were happening and the rapes that were happening.
Now, here's the interesting thing. When it comes to the theological underpinning for hate of queer folks, it oftentimes comes to the argument that sex is sin and that sex produces at least life, and then you can ask for that. So if you're
Well, that
having
was the
sexual
patriarchal
relations,
change when they took way later. Yeah. I mean, well, probably even from the beginning, actually. But
Well, I
but I
mean,
feel like the argument is like it's sin with no purpose. And there's no redemption. That's always been the hatred of people who actually want to. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's arguments that were made in like the 14th to 15th century theologically that supposedly, and I'm doing air quotes if you can hear me right now, back that back up. But the point is it's nonsense and always has been nonsense because that's not the way in which bodies should be judged.
correct.
no,
Well,
I mean, there's really so much, when you look at it, it doesn't even, it doesn't make sense.
Well, I mean, it really, you can really boil it down to like men, but I mean, it really in the men in the sense of the complete control of women over centuries, right? And sexually, right? And really, when you look at the way men, that what I would call toxic masculinity of the culture we have today, is so much rooted in that, right? And so when we're talking about the challenge of men with, it's mostly, this is why when you ask men, is it okay if it's two women? And they're like, well, that's kind of okay, but then you say two men and it's like, no.
Right.
I mean, all of that is rooted in power and control for them.
And I also think it's rooted in a jealousy of reproduction. I think man in the gender of maleness as it's typically constructed, and I don't want to reconstruct it here specific, but if we take that, it's about, well, you can be dominion over land, you can be dominion over wildlife, or property of bodies, but you can't necessarily reproduce. So I think patriarchy a lot of times is, and when you think about it also, the same trope of unproductive body, it feeds into like the imagery that you get a lot from of queer folks throughout history, like eating babies. The idea is, the extrapolation is like, not only are you not producing babies, but you are keeping babies from being born. And you see the same logic mirrored in discussions on abortion and on women's bodies. This idea that these babies were predisposed, and that because you chose this lifestyle, you've actually killed another baby. And there you've got these statues, literally you can go back through history, you can find them in the 14th, 15th century throughout Europe, of queer folks being depicted eating babies or harming children, all sort of stuff, because those tropes are, well, you didn't let that child that was supposed to be by God. A lot of this comes down to that sin, that unproductive sin, and not asking repentance, and the way in which it's been justified through 100 different lenses. And it really doesn't ever make any sense, because when we talk about it, queer bodies and queer folks have always been a part of communities and produce in the communities, are part of families, build families, and
can have families,
not an existential threat by themselves. And it seems really strange to me, other than, like you said, that patriarchal desire, and then jealousy.
Well, I mean, that because when you think about it, what do men attach their value to in society? Right?
their name,
but what purpose do we serve? For some of us men that have really thought it out, we understand that there's more than one facet to us and more than one expression of masculinity, and even expressions of the feminine energy, and that's okay, that you're not just masculine energy or just feminine energy. That's not how it works. but outside of that more evolved, sought after understanding, we attach our value to our ability to protect, right? Fight, our ability to fight. And I mean, really, that's a lot of it, right?
Women can fight.
Well, yeah, but
Women
that's
do fight.
I can fight.
well, but that goes back into a more evolved discussion of nobody's all feminine and all masculine.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think there's also the ability to provide, which is another thing that's kind of being blown out of the water because so many women are working.
And
Yep.
Well, that doesn't really work either.
what do we attach to our ability to provide? Right? You draw a direct line back down to hunting, right? Being the one that gives the food, does the killing, etc.
That's a stereotype. There are lots of women who've been hunters, non-binary folks, two-spirit folks. I mean, depending on the roles and different circumstances of the culture.
That's part of the problem that we're vocalizing in general is that there's these huge stereotypes. And,
correct.
And they have been built that way and reinforced. Right. I mean, that's a big thing. You look at the patriarchal society. What's one of the big problems that we have as a human species? We're constantly at war. Well, where's the motivation to constantly be at war? Well, where's men's value? We attach our value to fighting. So why would we not consciously or subconsciously continuously create scenarios where we have to prove our value?
Well, that's why I think so many things should be run by women. But anyways,
I think
women, trans women, we just know. We know how to keep the peace. It's evident.
I don't disagree with you. I do absolutely think that more things need to be run by women, but I think that something that we gloss over in saying that, and I just have to vocalize this because it gets missed a lot by men and women.
Yes.
Is we gloss over, well, we'll just give control over to somebody else. Sure. We still need men to evolve.
Yes, we do. We still need men.
Just taking away men's power is not the answer.
That's true.
All right, we need men to evolve because ideally men would give that power up and share it through that evolution. It shouldn't be us always trying to pull power away from each other.
Right, correct.
It should be both sides evolving to where we're empowering everybody.
Each other.
And so I do think we need to make sure we don't skip that with men just suck. Let's just take everything away from them. Let's encourage men to become what we want them to be.
Right.
Let's just not, throw that away. Big part of that conversation has to be encouraging, focusing, and facilitating men becoming who we complain that they're not.
And I think that begins by owning this misrooted anger and jealousy towards women. Because when you really think about the whole behavior, this idea that men should be able to control women's bodies, it's always this expression that they can't do something, that they can't produce life in the same way. And if we don't have respect for that, like as a species, regardless of gender, as people, as a human being, like that's where you start to see things like the reduction of cis female bodies, of uterus possessing bodies into capital or something to be used or exploited, because you don't value the breadth of life. You don't value the process. You don't value the person. You don't value the community. And there's, like I said, I think if you don't address that within yourself as a cis man, if you don't really say, well, why is this threatening to me? Why do I feel like I need to do more? Why? You're never going to get to the root cause of truly loving and accepting women as equals and people in your community who do produce children, who do build families and produce families in ways that you might not be able to as even superior in some ways. And that's the truth of equality, is understanding that there's difference and that there is variety and that there's strength in all of those things. So I digress. I don't mean to, I'll sit here and rant all night, y'all.
I was going to ask Jessica, so is you have one trans and one
non-trans son, 18, and
18.
Non-binary daughter
is 13. Okay. I am starting to see our 12, 13, 14-year-olds starting to use more, wanting to use they them pronouns more. And I feel like the only way that kind of out of this where we are is to continue to challenge the binary.
Yeah.
And how I think we're challenging the binary is through these younger kids who are saying, you know what, I don't know that we want to do things the same way that you've been doing things. And that's really terrifying a lot of people. This is why this parental rights movement has reared its ugly head yet again, because this is just a cyclical battle in history. It just continues to every, several decades. We've already gone through a parental rights movement before. You guys might remember it as in called integration. And so, it was a whole thing, this whole integration thing, right? So this is why politicians are so focused on education. They're starting to understand, why? Because these younger kids are coming home and saying, I don't really like this gender specific, you basically genderizing me with everything, right? And it's challenging some of these parents. And my husband and I are starting to see this. It's been really interesting. Some of our really good friends that we've known have been coming along in their awareness as having, been in the military and, just it's like you're stamped with conservatism, And so as their kids are now evolving and going to college and they're getting into high school, middle school, high school, we have some friends that my husband and I sit and snicker at after we've gone to dinner or done whatever. And we not maliciously snicker at them, but we're like, haha, their child is definitely having an impact on them. And we're just watching this beautiful transition happen, right? Even with some of our friends who that we've been like, there's things that my husband and I were seeing that we knew they weren't seeing yet. Mm-hmm. And because my husband and I look the way we look, younger people, they look at us and they're like, wow, like you really do that. Like you really look like that and you don't care, and there's a respect for it in this younger generation because they just want to be authentically themselves. And they're pushing that envelope with their parents and they're scared.
Well, and that's the thing is they see, if you will, they see the Matrix.
Correct.
Right?
Red pill, blue
pill. They see
pill.
the Matrix. They understand, specifically in this regard, that gender's a construct. They see that. Mm-hmm. And they understand that the limitations that puts on you. Right? Because, not a lot of people have sat down and asked themselves how much of me is me and how much of me is what I've been told a man's supposed to be.
That's right.
And et cetera, with all the different, stereotypes in your life, your race, your gender, all of those things. How much of you is you? This is actually what I like, and this is actually what motivates me and what I find wonderful and interesting. Mm-hmm. And how much of you is what you've been told a man is, or what you've been told,
or what you're mirroring.
What you're mirroring
to fit in, because you don't feel like you fit in, right?
And then how much of that becomes you, regardless, over time, because experience shapes who you are. Even if you're acting, even if you're trying to fit in, over time, I feel like these things leave little marks. It's like erosion on the side of a mountain or something. The body keeps the score. I feel like I'm going to give someone something, but it's we keep these little things that they don't go away, and they shape who we are in the future. But the other thing I wanted to say about fear, and just to bring it back to what Melissa was saying, is that I think that, and this has really been the central thesis, talking about fear tonight, is talking about trans families. Mm-hmm. What is a trans family? And then also teaching parents and letting parents see that there are other ways of building families. Mm-hmm. A big fear that you expressed at the beginning that we kind of glossed over, we kind of went back talking a little bit about, procreation and being able to have children, but it's like a lot of trans people can still have kids.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Even if you are going through medical the degree, even if you're on hormone, it's still possible. There's all different ways to prepare. And family planning is a larger discussion that we should be having that goes along with sex education. But I think all of this comes into focus. And this is the work that we're doing at Kalos. And this is the work that I love you're doing with 757 Trans Family. It's right there in the name, 757 Trans Family, is to lead with that image because it makes harder for those people that hate us to be bludgeoning these things. It also is a salve for the fear that parents have because when they see trans families, and I know so many trans families that are thriving, we just had 2 on last week. We had Mel and Amore. And those are the stories I think that are going to change hearts and minds. But I didn't mean to get off track.
No, you're good. I mean, it really is a lot of people, I think Jessica would agree with me, fall into a kind of trap of hyperfocus. Where just even with our children, this isn't everything about our child, and this isn't everything about our child's life, and our child still has this is just one part, one
facet,
piece.
right?
And people do the same thing with all of those, big pathos and ethos bombs that media and people like to drop. There's just, it's a trans person's life's not all about their 1 or 2 gender affirming surgeries that they maybe have over the course of their entire life. That's not what their entire life's about. But we get this kind of hyper focus because so much of the normalcy and the rest of who people are is removed from the conversation.
Yep.
And especially when you don't have community to interact with, right? Because then you just kind of sit there in your own little bubble of hyper focus with nobody around to pop it. And these, having dinners, having community, spreading and showing, trans joy and just the extensiveness and overall myriad of what a person's life is kind of diffuses some of that hyper focus and allows people to take a step back and see more of the picture.
I think a lot of that hyper focus too, and I often turn back to the media, but is the fact that when a trans person is represented in the media, it's about their transness. And, it's either about, the deception or, the transition or, there's so many things that it's like their transness is the focus. And I think I've seen one series where the woman that was in Glow, I can't remember her name. She was the main character in Glow. Which was all about trans and Vogue and that community. And, but she was in another series where she's a trans woman and it had nothing to do with her transness. She was a powerhouse that, was, I think running an activism program for her community. And she was very serious about it. And so like, it wasn't about that. It was the fact that she had a life and she had these other things. And so I think that a lot of the hyper focus is that that's what we're shown, and that's what's in our faces. And so creating that education and talking to people and having trans people visible in our community, is what people need to see to take them seriously for real.
Well, there's like a small, okay. So like the way we socialize, right? We socialize in small talk. Okay. So when, you may not have a trans person in your life. And so if you don't, and then you're in a room with a trans person, and even if you've got a little bit of knowledge, right? I think that we don't talk enough about the social, like the way people may feel about, they don't want to say the wrong thing, right? So then they make it awkward. Right. And then, and then we have to talk about the gendered language we use constantly when we meet somebody. Oh, so you make an assumption about their gender. So then you ask them pointed questions about their life based on the gender you have assumed they are. Right. And then it makes it even more awkward when somebody has to, and so we have to stop using gendered language too, get into these, like I'm trying to get myself out of saying dude. I'm trying. So I'm trying.
Dude and bro.
I mean, a bro. Like, but see, I don't use bro as much. I use bruh. So I found bruh, bruh, what is going on? So, but yeah, just gendered language.
It cuts both ways as a trans person. Like I'll be dropping sisses and girls and babes also.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, I'll be talking to a trans man. And I find myself doing so. Like the nature of this is something that is not. Like I feel cis people, it is like they're carrying like, oh my gosh, a bunch of eggs or something are going to drop, and they're just scared, and that needs to go away because
Agreed.
it just needs to be an understanding that there are going to be trans folks who are experiencing dysphoria, and like it always hurts, and sometimes it's going to hurt more, and you have to own the hurt and just move past it. It's like a social faux pas. But you go up to a lot of conversations, sometimes people speak first or do something awkward. You move past it and you go through your life, and if we can leave spaces for those sorts of things, and then also the space that if you're like intentionally, maliciously over and over and over again, that is a different thing entirely. Then I think we as a society can stop giving the conservatives so much ammunition over little rhetorical games, and then we can get back to the real discussions of not just trans people, like you said in this depiction, but thriving trans people, thriving Black trans men of color. I'll say it every time, every episode, but I love their name because it is important that we're focusing the thriving, which is beyond our transness, but not exclusively beyond our trans. Sometimes it runs through our transness. Sometimes it runs through the being of who we are. So to me, I don't like to, extricate these two things as different camps. Sometimes in this discussion, other discussions, it's like, well, we want to have transness or not have transness. I want to have holistically who I am, be who I am, and succeed in what I'm doing. And if my transness is what someone sees first, I cannot control the way they perceive the world.
That is right.
And if they perceive my womanhood first, or they perceive my class first, my race first, I cannot necessarily, but I would think that as a society, we're going to be working harder to see the person. At least that's what conservatives like to say. They judge people based off of their actions. But ultimately, they're the ones that are arguing for sexism and these sort of literal sexism. Let's have it de jure, but I digress. I'm sorry. I'm going off on a tangent.
You're good. But I think that that's really important, why it's so important for us to have the dinners and, express trans family is because that becomes normal life.
Normal life for me.
Right. Exactly. And, like that becomes normal. Like we're a family and, we have dinner together and, and that's why there's so many, chosen families. It's like this didn't work out for me and I've decided for myself that I want to live a life that has family dinners and and so that's why it's so important. And as like when I was creating my marketing and stuff like that for the workshop, and I almost wanted to put parents in quotes because like who are our parents? Who are our parent figures? And, there's so many more people than just my literal mom and dad that I look at as parents. And so, with that, like expressing who is a parent, like then that kind of opens up your possibilities for who is your family and who are your safe people and space. And, and I think just kind of like normalizing that family and that space and dinners together and and there's like you said there's the judgment of actions and it's like we're just having dinner. we're just here being a family. Like
the kids are playing the board games in the other room. We've got some, we got dishes.
Had a little argument between, whoever's over there. Like it's just family. We're just living life.
And it is in a lot of ways that perceived lack of normalcy, that kind of perception that this isn't normal, that seems to be like a big part of that communication gap to begin with. Like you're hitting on, when they go up to a trans person not knowing what to say. Well, why would you say anything so terribly different to them than you'd say to anybody else that you walked up and started a conversation with? Hey, how you doing? I'm so-and-so. What's your name?
But I think we're missing what we're ignoring is social anxiety and how much social anxiety does impact how we interact with others. And I do think that there is, that yes, while it is easy to say like, oh, we'll just, interact, just why would you? But I think people get in their own heads,
But
Cody.
that's the same thing. That anxiety shouldn't be any different between people. If you have social anxiety, then you have social anxiety.
Right.
The problem is that because of the perception of it not being normal, that increases the anxiety.
That makes me think about your original question of what comes up from parents a lot. And besides what I had mentioned, there's that they, them. Like,
I'm telling
just,
you.
I'm an English teacher and they, them just. It's
You're
like,
an English teacher and you don't understand to use they, them, and
in singular.
In singular. What? Okay, you shouldn't be an English teacher.
All right, bro, that's hella cool. Everybody talks in proper English all the time, and everybody always brings up how you didn't use proper English about everything else.
Yes.
So this is the one grammar problem we have.
I know, right? I did want to ask with your workshops, is it only the parents, and do you have like your trans kid there, child, or is it only like how who's there in the workshop?
So for the first one I did, like I said, it was my capstone project, so I was trying to fill a few seats.
Yeah.
So excuse me. I did invite other people. We had grandparents. We had parents. We had some people that are parents in the queer community that identify as non-binary themselves. And so there was a mix at the first workshop.
Okay.
Going forward, I would like to focus on parents. It's difficult, though, because I have several friends who are very supportive who can't be parents, and they want to learn and they want to be supportive. And it's like, I want to make sure that they're able to be included. But I think it'll be a different group because parents of transgender children have
there's a different
fears.
Yeah,
it's
different.
It's a different experience.
It's a different experience than just being an ally, wanting to learn how to be a better ally. There are workshops that should be separate than like I feel like in that sense. Like yes, trans parents
how
should
to be a good ally and how to navigate being a parent.
Right, exactly.
It's just two different conversations.
Two different conversations.
As a trans person, I was so grateful to see what you're doing because it enables us to do things like the Trans Family Dinner, which has trans elders, trans folks, trans parents, trans sibs, the cis kids of all having all together. That's a certain type of space, but an intentional space for our parents, for the parents of people who are scared it's necessary.
Right.
If we don't do that, then how can we create the Trans Family Dinner as a safe space? Because we can't have those same conversations where they may or may not hurt the children, hurt the parents, or strain the social relationship.
That's why I asked if there were trans folks there, because I do feel like that there needs to be, that these parents are cisgendered parents, and it needs to be, a space for them, as we were talking about before recording, where I hate using the word safe space, but in the sense, I always want to be as a trans parent. I want to hear you say something that probably will make my ears bleed because I need to address it with you.
Yeah.
And that and it's important to not have trans people in that space, because if it's making my ears bleed, it's going to be harmful to trans people. But we have to have that because I can't address the things people won't say out loud.
You have to be able to make mistakes to learn.
You do.
That's just part of the learning process.
Correct.
You have to be able to environment where you can make mistakes, or you're not going to learn very well.
We have to have some place to dispose of the bombs, and we don't want to do that in the middle of the living room.
Bomb
disposal place.
So true.
What's important is that they're there trying to learn.
Right.
All of that stuff that they're trying to unlearn, that's going to come out. And it's not a bad thing that comes out, because that's how you work through it and you actually do the learning.
But how, and the time and the space, so we talk about safe. I understand, because safe space is a very intentional word.
Right.
And I really wanted to come back to something talking about trans families, because the definition of a trans parent is something that I've gotten into contention with different organizations. I define a trans parent as our cis parents that have trans kids, but also our trans parents who have cis kids, and also extend it to exactly the concept that we were touching on there, which is found family and people, chosen mothers and chosen fathers. And something that's very interesting to me is that this is something that happens less, and I don't want to speak in overgeneralizations, but less in the white trans community due to the nature of race politics and the intersection. But I know that when we're talking about ball culture, when we're talking about Black and Latino culture and BIPOC culture inside the trans and queer community, the essential nature of family structures, the atypical nature, the lack of respect by white folks, by legal institutions, and by communities of these families is is gut-wrenching. It also has consequences, financial consequences and social consequences. This entire week, the trans community in Hampton Roads has been rocked by the loss of Lexis Walker. And I did not know Lexis very well. We got to meet a couple times, and she's the sweetest, warmest person I ever got to meet.
Yeah,
so I'm not going to sit here and talk on her life beyond the fact that she was the mother to many of the people that I love and care about, and was there time and time again. And you cannot tell me that that's not a family.
Right.
You cannot tell me that that is not love, that that is not support, and anybody who looks at that and has disrespect for that or looks down their nose at that, really needs to look at their own family, their own lives, and then they have to decide what sort of community do they want to live in. Do they want to live in a community where we have more healthier, stronger knit families and communities, or not? And I know that I don't know. I don't know what else to say about the loss of Lexis because it's so sad.
It is. And I didn't know her very well either. I knew her in passing. And I have to say that this week, it's really made me reflect on speaking to people. And because she's one of those people that I was intimidated by. She's so beautiful and she's so like leadership and strong and, and so it was a couple, like she'd compliment me on my shirt. There was a shirt, and whatever. And I'm like, thanks, and move on. And it's like, I want to talk to you. I want to be your friend. And, and it really has kind of impacted me in that way this week. Like I could lose anybody at any time. And, and I have to talk to these people. I have to, be friends with these people and invite them into my life as well. And, so absolutely. That has definitely been a huge impact.
I understand, like Lexis, like being intimidated by her presence and her beauty, like it's something that I completely understand. But when I first started doing this work with the Kayla's Coalition, I was one of the first people to be introduced. And I don't even know what else to say other than, we all need to come together and love and open our hearts. And that goes especially to any conservative or hate listeners. Why can't you just let families love each other?
Well, they have all kinds of excuses for that. But I did want to touch on trans family dinner, so we could talk about that because we are talking about trans families and having dinner and your workshops. And I love what you're doing so much. And please, we will exchange information so that I would love to come to your workshop. I would love to, talk to other trans parents. Like my kids aren't young anymore. So I'm out. My 29-year-old is trans, trans non-binary, more mask, very queer, as they say. And they live with their husband in Wisconsin. Okay. So and then my youngest is 23. So, I really want to be able to talk to other parents, but I don't necessarily find myself in the same spaces all the time with other parents of trans people, unless it's something school board related. Right. And that's
third Sunday every month. That's what we're
yes.
doing.
So we're doing that. So trans
one.
family dinner, I can make this one, is January 21st. And can we talk about who wants to talk about the trans family dinner?
TFT coordinator over here.
Oh, TFT
The
coordinator.
trans family dinner coordinator, Cody. Over here. We've moved them to the third Sunday of every month just to kind of make it easier for people to get to. And this month's taco night.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. We even got all the
Everybody
extracts
loves
for the hot sauces. I think we're going to do like homemade hot sauces, hot as you want.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Everyone's
I'm
like, no,
good.
Taco
Do you see
Tuesday,
the
but on the
skin?
third
I like
Sunday of the
because of
month.
the sweetness.
Thank you. Do you see the skin? I'm so white. I'm so white. I have a capsaicin sensitivity. Okay, so I like my stuff.
Tomatoes are spicy?
I basically, yes. I'll eat something. I'll be like, oh, this is spicy. And my husband's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, it's spicy. He's like, it's not spicy. I'm like, it's spicy.
But guacamole, yes. I will bring the
guacamole.
Oh, bring,
listen.
please.
Yep. Yes. Oh,
Please,
yeah.
that's-
Okay.
That's probably one of my wife's favorite memories. We just started dating, and I was, making her dinner, doing the whole fancy dinner thing. And one of the things I was doing was guacamole. So I got the avocados and everything. I just put it in the blender and all of that, and then just hit the button without putting the lid on it. And shot guacamole all up on my new girlfriend's apartment ceiling. It was very suave.
Yeah.
Very suave. Good move. Anybody out there taking notes?
Always put the lid on the blender.
Put the lid on it, yeah.
Yes.
Don't
But
put
y'all are
anything
still
hot in the
together,
blender.
right? So
It worked.
it works.
Yes.
It worked.
So
You hear it right here. Make a guacamole.
Unusual strategy, but
Turn it into
hey,
I think
Smash.
I think for
Self-care.
next podcast
You-
we need to have guacamole.
you can't argue the results. Over
His
15
guacamole.
years together.
Oh.
So
Oh.
can't argue the results. But no, this night, taco night, should be a lot of fun. Should have a lot of people coming. You know what I'm also looking forward to?
Tell us.
We've been prepping at my house. We got all the dice out. We're
I was just
going
about
through
to-
the adventure. Getting the kids all used to, because the youngest is right on the edge. So we're trying to work out some of those maturity things. Just
I'm so excited because yes, I know what you're talking about.
make a character that does.
Come on.
Or
you know,
announcing-
Stop stalling. Give it to
But
us. What is it?
really looking forward to our gamer night, our Dungeons and Dragons gamer night.
Yes.
I think I'm going to be really excited about that.
Are you the dungeon master?
No,
Who's the
no,
dungeon master?
I'm the dungeon master at home.
Thea.
Because nobody
Dungeon
else
master.
really has done that before, but I'm very much looking forward to
Oh.
Thea
My
being the dungeon master. She's
son-in-law.
probably much better at it than
Well,
me.
my son-in-law is apparently the dungeon master, and I have not created a character, but my kids want to create a character for me. We've talked about this. I didn't have a lot of creative play as a child, so I don't have I'm not very creative play, but I'm down for a good time.
Right.
So you know what I mean? Like I'm always down for a good time.
D&D's
So
a good time.
Yeah,
It's
so
really
D&D's a good
storytelling.
time.
We're just sitting around
Right,
telling
and
stories.
you have a
rolling
theater
math rocks.
background?
Well, not so much a theater background as it is a communications background.
oh, okay, yeah.
And I
He has a
know,
theater background, so he is so good at being a dungeon master.
Okay, that's perfect. Anyone who has experience with improv too.
Well, he lives in Wisconsin.
Bring them anyway.
Yeah, it's my son-in-law in Wisconsin. Yeah, unfortunately, so my kids but they'll do with virtual. So they'll do sometimes like my youngest who lives here will join in their D&D games.
Perfect.
Yeah,
And we're
yeah.
hosting these. We're going to be doing them all throughout the year.
Okay, so
we're
I can
doing
come.
it the last Saturdays of every month at the 757 Creative Reuse Center in Norfolk.
Okay.
They're located in MacArthur Mall on the second floor, just past the Lush. And if you go in there, it's a wonderful safe space. They have all the classrooms. I mean, I talk about them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love everyone in there. They're, like I said, a great place to go. We can set up a couple games. This first month,
my
we're going to do
gosh.
one game. We'll see if we can't get another DM in there so we have enough space and places. So if you are listening to this and you enjoy rolling math rocks and you enjoy, painting figures or telling stories, or you've ever wanted to,
doing it.
reach out to us. You can go to kaliscoalition.com/events, and we have a form that you can sign up right there so that we'll make a space for you. But yes,
If I go to
Awesome.
if I learn how to play Dungeons and Dragons and then surprise my kids by having that would be
Oh, you just show up and then
Yeah.
sit down with like your extra special
that
personal
D&D.
dice
And they're gonna
set
be
and
like,
break it out. And
what?
be like,
And I have my dice,
yeah,
dice
your
bag
little,
and stuff.
Your little fold up rolling
Yes.
box. And
All right. Well, I hope. Well, I mean, I don't hope that my kids don't listen to this, but just
that'll ruin the surprise.
it'll ruin the surprise. I've probably ruined it already.
Should
But
have
I hope
started
your
that out
kids don't
with
listen to this so that we can surprise
I
them.
know, but I really want them to.
No, I'm
so.
kidding.
I
This
know,
is kids.
I
Please
know,
listen to
I know.
us.
And before we move on to the news, Jessica, do you have like a
Events,
place people can go to get
Yeah,
some resources,
so-
information, and stuff coming up?
Absolutely. So we're also, I know that Mel and Amore mentioned the parent group and the kids group that we're doing together. And so for that, the way I'm leading that is it's going to be strictly parents. And the first hour is talk. It's let's just chat, get things off your chest. It's that safe space to say things that you might not want to say in front of your kids. And the second hour is going to be an educational of some sort. So
great.
we'll have that going on as well.
What's the when and where on that?
It's at the Norfolk Mass, and it's the 21st of February.
Yes, it's
believe
21st of February because
Wednesday
our
night.
trans family dinner is January 21st.
Yes.
And so it's February 21st because I patterns.
Yes. So we're meeting at Norfolk
good.
Mass.
Okay.
Norfolk.
And I have a website at 757transfamily.com. And then I have also started our social media pages, launched them. So 757 Trans Family on Facebook, on Instagram. And that's where I am now. So yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Look me up.
Great. Follow. Give a follow. We need to
Yep.
give them follow. Very good. Well, I think I'll
What do we got in the news?
Oh, wow. Well, we have
Dave Chappelle making the news?
Dave Chappelle making the news. This just, why do I hate him now? This is why. I'm going to tell you now. Okay.
Before we hate on
Yeah.
Dave Chappelle,
Oh.
I so apologize. I just looked down at my notes. There's one other thing I'd love to announce.
Oh, yeah. The resume
absolutely.
We just
workshop.
put it out today. We're hosting a resume workshop. It's a resume success workshop that's being hosted by Ezra Rose of Beat the Bots. Ezra is a 10-year veteran and a proud trans man who is coming together to teach us all little tips and tricks on how you can get your resume into the hands of a human being and actually get the job. They offer services separately, but it's a free workshop available to the community. You can go online to kalescoalition.com/events again, and you should be able to get your free ticket and reserve. Get them because we only have limited spaces as soon as you can. Sorry.
Yay!
Now let's go on to hating
resume
on Dave
building
Chappelle.
is so
Now we can
important.
hate Dave Chappelle.
Now, let's hate Dave Chappelle. All right. So, according to Yahoo Entertainment, stand-up comic Dave Chappelle doubled down on jokes about trans people in his newly released comedy special, The Dreamer. The comedian's decision to include such jokes in the comedy special comes after he previously faced severe backlash for his Netflix show, The Closer. Chappelle's latest Netflix special is bound to draw mixed reactions from audiences as the comedian opened the show with jokes targeted at the LGBTQ plus community. That man is never going to learn. So The Dreamer is his new show.
Don't even
Oh,
tell them
sorry.
what it is.
Sorry, I'm reading the article.
Giving Dave Chappelle some
Premiered, I know.
free
Apparently it came out
advertisement.
I think it's on, the Netflix on December 31st. So it says the show mostly centers on Chappelle's formative years in show business and how he achieved fame, but the comedian used his first 12 minutes. That's like almost, I don't know, a fifth of the show. 12 minutes of the set to attack transgender individuals. He started the show by sharing an encounter he had with actor Jim Carrey on the set of the 1999 film Man on the Moon. Carrey famously embodied the role of the comedian Andy Kaufman in the movie by method acting. Chappelle then stated that he was very disappointed interacting with Carrey while he was pretending to be Kaufman, claiming that is how, quote, trans people make him feel. Following his brief recollection of his encounter with Carrey, the comedian then went on to speak about the uproar over his anti-trans jokes. He said, if you guys come here to this show tonight thinking that I'm going to make fun of those people again, you've come to the wrong show. I'm not fucking with those people anymore. It wasn't worth the trouble. I ain't saying shit about them, maybe 3 or 4 times tonight, but that's it. I'm tired of talking about them. And you want to know why I'm tired of talking about them? Because these people acted like I needed them to be funny. Well, that's ridiculous. I don't need you. I got a whole new angle coming. You guys will never see this shit coming. I ain't doing trans jokes no more, quote. And then he went on to basically punch down and say he happily punches down and he's going to now start, doing his bits on handicapped people.
Isn't this the 3rd or 4th time Dave Chappelle has come out and said, I'm not going to do trans jokes anymore?
I know, right? So stop doing trans jokes.
Well, and just the joke in general. So, like, I don't know if you read about the joke. He was talking about how he went to go meet Jim Carrey. He was a big Jim Carrey fan, I guess. And he went to go meet Jim Carrey when he was doing this show, and he was method acted Andy Kaufman. Jim Carrey, because he was method acting Andy Kaufman, insisted that everybody treat him like Andy Kaufman.
Sure.
And Dave Chappelle, the joke was, I was so disappointed because I wanted to go meet Jim Carrey, but he was Andy Kaufman, and that's how trans people are. That's how they make me feel. But good comedy is usually something that exposes something funny about something.
Yes.
Not just exposes
Your bigotry?
The bigotry and the things that make the comic themselves uncomfortable. Because, I mean, that same thing could be said as everybody. Everybody's acting to an extent, right? Like, we just don't let every single impulse we have and...
We don't let everybody see us.
Yeah. And sometimes it's very necessary.
That's correct.
Right? I mean, everybody's acting at work.
Yeah. We say, we're, being self-employed, we hire and have, unfortunately, people depart. But we say it's their representative. Everybody has a representative, and it depends on how much time and interaction you have with them before they no longer let you see their representative.
Yeah. But just, everybody's acting. but it's more of a commentary on how Dave Chappelle's uncomfortable and unable to really, have a perspective on trans people. Because, I mean, you take that exact same thing and switch it around, and how many people have to walk around pretending like Dave Chappelle's not an asshole all the time?
Right.
Just got to pretend like he's such a nice guy. I mean, that probably makes a whole lot of people around him very uncomfortable, that I just got to pretend like you're somebody that I don't think you are.
Yep.
That exact same concept, but once again,
Well, there's a reason why they call it gender roles. It's because we're all acting them out. It's a process. And we're taught these different roles in different ways with place, and so it makes sense to me. But you think that my issue with Dave Chappelle is not that he's not funny, because the man's funny. Like, I've heard these arguments about technical funniness. I mean, I remember laughing at him.
About that,
There's things that I can laugh at. I can even watch The Closer and find some things that are funny. And I've watched some great analysis about it. It isn't really a question of funniness or not funniness. I feel like that's him shifting the burden. It really comes down to harm or no harm. And my issue is, again, I'm not going to use all the names of people and things correctly because I didn't research this particular diatribe, but I can tell you that when he met a young trans comedian, Daphne, we'll use her first name, when he found her and brought her into his limelight, so to speak, and used her picture on, what is it, I guess it was the second or third Netflix special, and didn't tell her, credit her with her full name and picture and all sort of stuff, created a bunch of buzz for this young comedian. Really, I mean, if you think about it, one of the most preeminent stand-up comedians in the world puts his light on you as a trans comedian, as a trans feminine comedian, and, she ended up committing suicide, and he ended up blaming the trans community online. But there's not a lot of discussion about how he met a trans woman, tried to use her for his show, put her image on there, say, hey, I can make trans jokes because I know and have a trans friend.
Tokenized, his trans
alienated
friend.
her from her own community, who even then
Because
still
she
accepted her
supported him.
by and large. There was this lie that somehow there was all this hateful stuff. I remember going through the Wayback Machine. There was like 3 or 4 comments on her Twitter or something where it's like, how can you stand for Dave Chappelle? Obviously, after he came out with the special, it was flooded with all these different things. But it's he never had to pay consequences for that. And the thing about it is that this is the way that it works. When you have power and privilege, you can just discard people. And he tried to come on in one of the specials, the one before this one, and said something about how he created a scholarship fund for the
It was from The Closer,
from The Closer. And I just have to ask everyone listening: does someone who did nothing wrong create a scholarship fund?
That's right. Right. Oh, he absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I want to create a scholarship for Black trans youth, and I haven't done anything wrong. But I'll tell you right now, giving it specifically to his family is because that man in his bones, when he goes to sleep at night, knows his actions directly led to her death. And I don't say that. I'm not a legal. Please don't sue me, Dave Chappelle, and all the different people. In my
educational
opinion, let me put
purposes
the asterisk here. In my opinion,
I am
not a legal inspector, but to me, that's where it comes down to. And then when we tried to boycott it, people were saying boycott him for the direct harm that he caused to specific individuals and to the community. He doubled down, tripled down, and is now quadrupled.
Which is where
that's my problem.
Yes,
he can be funny.
That's
not funny.
It's not funny, right? And so that was where my love for Dave Chappelle, because I am going to admit this right now. So at the in DC, the theater there, they're opening after being closed for a year and a half from COVID. Dave Chappelle did a surprise show. Literally, we had 10 days notice. Like, there was no notice. And I bought tickets. My husband and I went to see it, and it was for The Closer. We didn't know what it was. We didn't know what the show was. It was just a surprise pop-up, get a bang. I mean, it was very unexpected, right? Sold out within like an hour, I think. We went, and my husband and I are sitting in the audience, and he spoke about Daphne, and he used that in The Closer as a bit. And one of the things we talked about was Dave Chappelle for me, because I have studied, improv and I stand-up comedy, and I don't have the courage to do stand-up comedy still. Maybe one day I will, but I have a appreciation for the artistry of that profession, right? His technical, I can appreciate him from a technical, his callbacks, the way he takes jokes and then he circles them back around, right? So that's when we speak of technical comedy. I had been already, he had already been pushing me on his jokes up and like before the closer, right? But I still was one of those people that would like. I love Dave Chappelle. He's a comedian. He probably that was not a joke. I'm not laughing at that joke. And then we went to the closer. You could hear a pin drop when he said that, like he did that bit about Daphne. You could literally hear like a pin drop. It was uncomfortable for many of us sitting there. And it was after that, I'm like, he immediately came out as soon as that Netflix, because I left and my husband, I was like, yes, while the majority of that show was funny, and outside of his trans jokes, but his trans jokes were, I mean, it was nauseating to me to sit there. And then it came out on Netflix, and then he double and triples down. And I was like, nope. I remember my husband wearing, because they gave us Chappelle masks, everybody in the audience, because we had to lock up our phones and they gave us Chappelle masks. And I remember my husband wearing that Chappelle mask one day when we were out somewhere, and I was like, take it off. But it's just there's a certain one, for years, you have somebody that you're like, I think they're a good comedian, right? And I can appreciate what they do, and I want to be supportive of him. And he has been through some shit with capitalism, right? And what years and years ago, he's been through some shit on that. But there's no excuse. It's disgusting, and you need to stop. And like the fact that he just continues to say, I'm not going to do trans jokes anymore, but I'm 12 minutes. Where do you think it's money? And where do you think these people get the idea that it's okay to talk at school board meetings the way they do about trans people, right? Mm-hmm. Because this is accepted. And, Netflix put that out again and said, this is art. It's his expression.
I think it's even more intentional. I can't look at Netflix and not see a comedy special by Ricky Gervais and Dave Chappelle come out in 2024, like right at the same time, back to back. I cannot see the specific enormous influxes of capital that are not going to trans comedians and Black trans people and people who could be up there entertaining folks. Instead, folks who literally treat us as a joke, exploit us, monetize us. And then, like I said, almost to the extent with Dave Chappelle, and this is my opinion, but to the point that trans people die, and then he doesn't have to take any responsibility. There's no responsibility.
Oh, no,
he blames it
he
on
blamed
us.
it on the trans community. Literally blamed it on the trans community.
I mean, the echoes of how racists deal with racist violence should be palpable. It should be evident for him.
Well,
but at the same time,
his proximity to whiteness.
I mean,
capital, not whiteness,
and capital.
Capital beyond whiteness too, but also
whiteness
capital.
Too.
Because let's face it, these are tens of millions of dollars of deals that he's talking about in these shows. And
he's sitting in rooms with white people.
I mean, he knows also that he can make a lot of money off of trans, like making fun of
and
he's bringing it up.
And he has no problem making it about money. I mean, I was reading.
Oh, right.
I was reading an article earlier today about how he basically shut down affordable housing in his community.
No way.
Absolutely.
In that Ohio town, that little Ohio town.
Little Ohio town that he lives in, was trying to put affordable housing in.
Yep.
And he went and spoke at the city hall meeting and told them flat out, I will pool all the millions of dollars that I'm investing in the community right out.
Wow.
Yes, he did.
Class interests. If capitalists can get minorities, folks who are hurting, folks that are in lower economic classes bickering and fighting each other. I mean, Dave Chappelle's picking at this guy between, Black people go, look how far trans people go. Literally saying these sorts of things, trying to put it in some sort of competition, like progress and freedom and having families and community. We should, this should be either or. That sort of thinking and that sort of framework serves capital at the very top, and it's no excuse that they give him more and more and more money.
No,
and
they're making him more and more money.
There you go.
There's a lot of money out there for bigotry. There's a lot of money, like the right now, like especially right now. Everybody
how many
wants
scholarships
to-
do you get your hands clean? How many? How much philanthropy?
Right.
Right.
We just
Yeah.
want to make sure.
How many,
As long
you
as
mean,
those scholarships don't go to critical race theory, I think is.
oh gosh, we didn't. Yeah. Okay. Well, enough about Dave Chappelle. Let's talk about Ohio, since we are talking, I think this is a great transition from Dave Chappelle to my
Yeah, 'cause
second news story about
Talk
Ohio.
about his governor.
His governor, yeah. So I'm going to open this quote, and I just cannot wait to hear Miss Thea on this. Oh, calm down. Oh my
Too
goodness,
excited
so
over here.
excited. So I'm going to open it up with a quote from the governor on this story. He says, this is Mike DeWine. Were I to sign House Bill 68, or were House Bill 68 to become law, Ohio would be saying that the government knows better what is medically best for my child. So, Governor Mike DeWine last Friday struck down legislation that would have restricted the medical care of transgender minors and banned transgender girls from female sports. House Bill 68, which cleared the House and the Senate earlier this month, would have, I can't recall if Ohio has a supermajority or not, but easily in Ohio bills can pass the Senate. So it was kind of a big deal for Governor DeWine to veto it, in the sense of he really shat in the face of his party. But the bill was basically preventing doctors from prescribing hormones, puberty blockers, or gender reassignment surgery before patients turn 18. It also would have prohibited transgender girls and women from playing on female sports teams in high school and college. So then he said, about signing that, and he's absolutely right. DeWine is being called a child mutilator. Veto of unholy bill shows that's far from true. That's a whole nother opinion piece here. So DeWine's decision came after he visited children's hospitals, spoke with families, and reviewed testimony for and against the legislation. You don't say. A governor, unlike the governor in our state, Governor Youngkin, who actually sat down and talked with medical professionals at a children's hospital. He spoke with families, and he reviewed testimony for and again. He actually listened to people's opinions, maybe.
Actually educated himself.
Actually educated himself. He said his administration will, but then he goes into say he said his administration will draft rules to ban surgery for patients under 18. This is where the problems come in. This is where Miss Thea gets very, very excited about this, to talk about this. Collect data on transgender medical care for adults and children. Restrict pop-up. Okay. Restrict pop-up clinics that don't provide adequate mental health counseling. Like, what do you think, that there's like a food truck?
Hey kids,
Like-
you want some trans?
Hey,
What the heck?
if you provided acceptable access to care, do you think you'd have pop-up clinics at all?
Right. Oh, whoa.
Just a thought.
Cody coming in with the mic drop. So, okay, I would have answered my own question about the supermajority had I continued to read the article before I opened my mouth. The bill passed the House and Senate with a supermajority, meaning lawmakers could mobilize enough support to override DeWine's veto, which is very important because that supermajority, they are going to have typically enough. When you have a supermajority, you have enough to override the veto. Ahead of Friday's news conference, DeWine's fellow Republicans, Lieutenant Governor John Husted, voiced support for the legislation and urged him to sign it. And apparently, Husted is expected to run for governor in 2026. He says, he posted on Thursday, "I've been asked my opinion on HB 68. I support it for two main reasons." These people. Men should not compete in women's sports. Permanent medical decisions concerning gender should not be made when you are a child. I hope the SAFE Act will become law in Ohio, end quote. And they're calling it the SAFE Act.
Well, they call themselves Mom for Liberty too.
Moms for Liberty is a very, that was a Ku Klux, Moms for Liberty is from the Ku Klux Klan.
Freedom Foundation.
Oh, I don't know if they're exactly from the.
They
Literally?
No.
Wow.
I just read a book in the spring called Ku Klux Klan in the Heartland. It's an Indiana professor at the University of Indiana who's a historian. That book was very, very good. I actually read it in a day while I was on vacation because it just sucked me in, and it had a couple galleries, but it does. I actually have a disgusting piece of artwork in that book that you can see that's got a caricature person in this piece of artwork, and it's like Moms for Liberty, but they originated like Moms for Liberty. Now, what is the group now? No, is not derived from Ku Klux Klan. Moms for Liberty was on like a newsletter. I mean, that is originated from a Ku Klux Klan.
Okay, so they pulled.
So they just basically pulled like Moms for Liberty. Maybe the name. The name, yeah, exactly.
So what do you think DeWine is up to here?
Yeah,
what do you think his agenda is, Jessica?
Well, I mean, that
puts you on the spotlight.
Yeah, that's the toss-up question. Is he really educated and concerned about, well, if we're going to stand for parental rights, then we give all parents rights, and parents have the rights to decide with their doctor and their child what's proper healthcare for their child? Or is this kind of his way of trying to prevent a law like this from being challenged in court and struck down, and finding a backdoor by using his executive powers to put those regulations in place and avoid some court and all of that and still get what the conservative agenda wants done?
But he has a supermajority.
I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Well, I mean, but that's the thing, is even with the supermajority, that doesn't override a court.
No, it doesn't override the court, but they can still get it passed and then do what they do. And what they always have done is put laws. They've been doing this since the end of the Civil War. They've been putting laws into place, knowing that they're racist, bigoted, homophobic, all of sexist, because they know the process through the court system will take a long time. And the damage through the law just getting in place, by the time it gets settled through courts, they will have already started to deteriorate. And that's what they've been doing. I mean, literally, y'all, since the Civil War, the end of the Civil War, like 90% of from the Civil War, our legislature started after the Civil War was majority Confederacy.
Well, and I think that's part of the strategy.
It is.
For that is, well, but on his side, is doing it through his executive powers, if he could find ways to use his executive powers so that it doesn't actually end up challenged in court at all.
But from a political perspective, okay, I this is where I will say this. Whatever his motives are, politically, as a Republican, that was like all the nails in his coffin.
I disagree.
Unless it works.
Tell me why.
Here's my theory.
Tell me why.
This is my theory. Okay, I think he's trying to open a lane up for himself, and because of the supermajority, he knew that this would not have to be owned by him. He sees the writing on the wall. He sees DeSantis faltering. He sees Trump being taken off the ballot. He sees all these different things, and is thinking, if not about 2024, thinking about 2028, and so on and so forth. I wouldn't put a single governorship in this entire country past those sorts of thoughts and planning. But that also enables him to get this vaunted, like, amazing area that every Democrat wants it, which is to be more moderate, more centrist. They want to have these space open. So if he could say, well, I oppose these sort of draconian laws, even then I wouldn't be surprised if the Ohio Republican Party and high-level officials were on board with this, because at a certain level, if they can get it through without him having to carry any of the baggage, then let's get it through. And then we can talk about re-election, especially in a state like Ohio, which is an important swing state, because they want to hold on to the governorships. But even beyond that, I want to just go back to his language. He said, his administration will draft rules to ban surgery for patients under 18. And this goes to what Cody was saying. It's like, okay, well, if we take this interpretation that, well, parents should be able to decide, what does this mean for conversion therapy? Because if you read these words in the most cynical possible way, and I understand that we all understand it's human abuse. It's not something that we should be done. But if you do take that to its logical extreme, well, they have found a doctor who is willing to do it, or they found a church or an official that's willing to do it, and the parents are on board for it. So, shouldn't that be their right within that framework? And I worry that they're trying to open up that framework in that front also. But then beyond that, with the vagary here, you can tell that there's always going to be, because he's not banning surgery for all patients under 18. That would be crazy. Does he intend to ban surgery for all minors, all surgery that the state deems delayable until the age of 18, all gender affirming surgeries for minors, or just all gender affirming surgeries for trans minors? Like, where exactly is the bright line on banning
Right.
because children still will need surgeries. And then are we going to allow a 14-year-old cis girl to have implants, or a 16-year-old, or like
Right.
17? Are we going to let, a young a cis male who has a gynecomastia or different things in his growing breast, are we going to let them have top surgery to be able, are we going to do these
breast
things?
reductions? I mean, one of my best friends
had
had
outlaw that.
Yeah, one of my best friends was 17 in high school and had a breast reduction.
Exactly.
So and that is gender affirming care.
Right.
And they had a medical reason. They said for back pain, right? But she was terribly afflicted with body dysmorphia, and she was cisgendered, but just by her breast size. So they're going to stop doing that.
Well, if they don't, are they just going to discriminate against trans?
Right. Oh, no,
trans
this is
families and
purely
trans
to discriminate. Yes.
Well, and that's the real hard part about the conversation overall, right? Because I think you kind of hit on it. What's his motivation? Is it about helping people? No, because when you look at it, especially when you look at his two statements, right? You have this one very, I get it. I've talked to all of these people. I understand these people are doing the best for their children. And so that's why I'm vetoing it, is they deserve these rights and we deserve to acknowledge all of that. But I'm going to take it away.
Right.
I'm just going to take it away this way. I'm still going to take it away. I'm just going to take it away with the other hand now.
But he gets to say, "Oh, I don't want to take it away." Those
but I
vetoed
them. And so both sides are
Fair.
like, "Oh, he vetoed that law," and then the other side's, "Oh yeah, but he still took it away." And so for him, it's not about what's best for parents and children, parents of trans children and trans children. It's about what's best for me possibly winning an election or an election in a higher seat. What provides me with the most overall vote coverage?
Right. Well, he sees Ohio because it's Ohio with this abortion, how they're supporting a constitutional amendment. He understands that Ohio is coming. It's coming over a little bit more, right? So it makes sense for him if that's what he's doing. Now, to do that, if he's really trying to play into the moderate vote DeWine politically, from a political perspective, DeWine is so far and low under radar for any sort of presidential aspirations.
Mike Johnson was too not long ago. Wasn't he? Mike Johnson was.
Who's Mike Johnson?
Speaker of the House.
Speaker of the House.
Mike Johnson. No, does he speak? Not for. I mean, not president, but Mike
I just
Johnson.
Need to say these folks fly under radar.
Mike Johnson was absolutely part of their playbook. He's under the radar in the sense of from Congress because there's 435 of them, right? Governors, a little different, right?
That's
but
fair.
But yes, I agree with you that Husted, his lieutenant governor, is running for governor. So he's got to make a play for the moderates in order to take, because he knows that Husted, his lieutenant governor, is going to be probably formidable competition.
He can't outright flank him because he's watching DeSantis and Trump flare out. So it puts him in a very limited space to move. So that, in my opinion, we should view this as a very cynically. And it comes down to policy.
Sure.
You can always look at the policies, not just that they're refuting, but the policies they're putting forward. And the lack of substance on the right lately has been crazy. If you wanted to change hearts and minds, be a real minded, he'd say, I'll be drafting legislation to increase public funding for mental health care. This includes gender affirming mental health care for trans youth. My administration intentionally intends to codify state protections for trans folks and their families from persecution and harassment in employment, housing, etc. If he was willing to do something like that, then we understand that he's heard these families. Then we understand that he cares about the root cause and he's actually got a solution to address it. And never mind the fact that this solution and policy holistically has claims to other solutions and things like trying to address things like gun violence. I mean, we know we all put it up to mental health things, which is its own cop-out in its own right. But at the same time, we do need more funding for mental health services and we do need protections for these things. So if Governor DeWine or anyone on his staff is somehow listening to us and thinks, oh, wow, how can these people be I know they're not. They don't give a crap. let me know, because you can put forward better policies, and you could open up an even better space for yourself and for the country if you're willing.
Yep, absolutely. I don't know why there's another. They're already talking about like the top 10 Senate seats, which goes into like to flip in 2024 because we've got the Senate race, which is really, really important. And Tim Kaine is the senator for this area here.
Is he up?
Yeah, he's running for re-election. Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah, no. Yeah, Tim Kaine's running for re-election. Well, we're waiting to see, but see if Governor Youngkin is going to throw his hat in, because there was some polling that was done a couple months ago to see how people in Virginia Beach, or at least in Tim Kaine's district, what basically polling on Tim Kaine versus Youngkin. So, like, why would you do polling if you weren't considering running against? And he thinks, I think very, very much so, that he has a chance taking it in Virginia Beach. I do not think that he does. My district alone, that for him, handily went to Tim Kaine, and it is a strong Republican district. It's a little bit less now than it was, but I mean, Tim Kaine his race is at risk. I mean, and we are absolutely, look, I want a whole change of guard in our politics, our federal level politics, but we cannot afford to lose Tim Kaine because of Mark Warner and Tim Kaine. Mark Warner. No.
One of them is a billionaire telecom. And then the other person, I believe, didn't he try to pass a new war powers?
Oh, I mean, they're all warmongers. I mean, at least Tim Kaine sits around with a harmonica, and his a really he's actually kind of a cool guy to sit and talk to.
A cool warmonger.
He is a cool warmonger. I mean, he's a warmonger. Listen, they're all warmongers, right? Sure. But that is something that is, we haven't heard anybody running against Kaine yet, but I
would not be surprised if you wouldn't find that Youngkin is soft in Virginia Beach. And the reason is that a lot of people were looking for a governor from the Southeast because Northam was the second or third ever. Most of the governors from this country, or from this country, the state, come from Richmond and Nova. So actually having representation down here. I don't know if our listeners are aware, but there's an enormous economic divide between Nova and Southeastern Virginia and the rest of parts of Virginia. A lot of the public resources go up towards Nova, especially for funding for roads and schools and other things like that. And there's a lot so I know that people down here are invested heavily in having representation from down here, but also he's kind of flubbed the ball and he can't run again. And there isn't a space for him in the governorship. And I don't know. I mean, I know actually a couple people that went to high school with Governor Youngkin, people who are friends of my father's and people didn't, because I grew up, I was born and raised here in Virginia Beach. And I can tell you there are a lot of people that gave him money and voted for him that are extremely disillusioned, especially because of his push for the theological nature of his approach. True. And banning TikTok for students is something that came out the other day. He wants to survey students' internet and then report to parents if there's any violation that the state decides. I mean,
meanwhile, this man's kids go to a $50,000 a year tuition private high school. His son tried to vote. His son tried to vote twice under 18 for his father. I mean, literally twice, not just once, but he went in and tried to vote, and then he waited for 20 or 25 minutes, they said, and came back into the precinct and tried to do it again.
Wow. That's so insulting.
But that just was glazed over in the media about him, And so I agree with you. There are a lot of people that, yes.
Even his son didn't think his dad could win. He had to
look, I know. That was the joke. Yes. But what you have to remember is the spirit of Virginia PAC. We have a Moms for Liberty, a high-level treasurer with Moms for Liberty that lives in Allenton, in the Allenton neighborhood of Virginia Beach, from my understanding. So we have, what was that crazy racist, bigoted lady that was going to run for president last time? Michelle, I never remember her. Bachman? Yes. Yeah, Michelle Bachman has been moved here. She's the dean of, she's the dean over a dean, not the dean of Regent, but she's a dean of, I want to say, the law school. Michelle Bachman, that lady. Yep. And definite racist. They've relocated her here. That's just been within the last couple of years. So money. We cannot ignore the money. His Spirit of Virginia PAC gets, I just saw donations from the Burger Busters, so all of our Taco Bells and our Burger Kings here. Mm. Yeah. So how about $250,000 in 2023? The corporation here in this area that owns all of the Burger Kings and Taco Bells, Burger Busters, they're out of Virginia Beach. Yeah. $250,000 to the Spirit of Virginia PAC. One was in June, one was in July. So money permeates this. Mm. And I agree with you. It's declining. His likability, his favorability is declining.
Well, and I think, for the regular person, we're starting to see it a little bit more, and I think you'll see it more. And I think Republicans are catching on to it a little bit more, and you can see it in some of their actions, is that a lot of people are asking the question like, okay, it's great you banned this and attacked that and but what have you actually done to benefit
Give me some policies.
Anybody at all? Like, okay, you banned these surgeries, but I'm still not making any more money. I'm still not getting any, and people are starting to see that the loud screaming fear stuff is starting to wear off a little bit. And we're seeing a little bit more of the, but you haven't actually done anything for anybody. Mm-hmm. You've only done things against people.
Ask any Republican. Ask any Republican to name 5 policies, or frankly, name me any policy that a Republican politician has put that has actually passed. That was a bill that was sponsored by a Republican, drafted by a Republican, that helped poor people. Name one. Ooh. Man, I tell you what, the crickets, the silence, it's in there. It's mind numbing, honestly.
Oh, and what's funny
name one.
is you do the math because it's interesting. You always have all these conversations, right? Like there's, a couple million homeless people, 6 million homeless people.
I don't even think so.
No. 500,000.
500,000. Yes, that's right. 500,000 homeless people.
Yeah.
500,000 homeless people and like over 15 million vacant homes.
Yep.
Right. And so I did the math one day because I'm weird like that, and I didn't have anything else specifically drawing my attention, and it cost approximately like $290 billion. If you were to buy, because it is more than 500, it's like 640.
I think it is more than, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think it's more
because now that I'm talking about it, like my
remembering.
Memory of this is kicking in. It's like 643,000, and the average the median home sales like 400 something.
In Virginia, it's $415,000.
Well, across the board now, it's over 400.
Yeah,
median
I believe that.
Not home value per se, but for what a home sells for.
Gotcha.
If you were to go buy a home,
median home sales
price is over $400,000, like $429,000 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so if you were to buy a home, not for every homeless family or anything like that, but for like every single homeless person, every homeless man, woman, and child, just buy one for everybody at the median home value, it'd be right around $290 billion.
Easy peasy. Write a check.
Which, for the record, that seems like a giant number.
Are you kidding
but,
me?
Well,
no, it's only a quarter of our freaking military budget.
Yeah, it's about a quarter of our defense budget.
Yeah.
It'd be maybe about an eighth or so of what of the taxes that the rich got given back because of Trump policies through tax loopholes.
2017.
And so literally, like, if we'd have just not letting incredibly rich corporations and people have tax loopholes, we could literally buy a house for every homeless person in our country like 3 times over.
I want to open like a tiny home.
Or if we just weren't so interested
called the tiny
in war.
I'll go one further. Like you put the statistics out there, it's about, 640 some odd homeless Americans, but it's about 90,000 homeless children.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to set aside $100,000, $1 million for every one of those kids, we could do that in a heartbeat. We could make sure that there were people trained, that they had education, that they had food and housing until they were 18. There is no lack of resources. What it is that instead capitalists they want the exploit. They want these children in these positions because there's a belief in this country. We got touched on it earlier, the bootstraps belief, this idea if you make good, strong bootstraps, you'll pull yourself up. But what it's actually doing is letting human suffering, take root.
Oh, yeah, that's a fairy tale that you get told so that...
Yeah.
Like regardless of, you won't even talk about responsibility and conservatism, so we shouldn't buy people houses. Are you going to talk about children?
Listen, y'all are thinking,
90,000
y'all
children?
are thinking, listen, I need to take y'all up. I need to take you up a little bit higher elevation here.
Okay,
y'all are like really, you're doing the thing that they want us to do. You're like, give me the scraps. Listen, there are like 338 million people in this country. Get all these fucking billionaires together and make them contribute to the pot, and everybody gets a fucking $1 million. We can buy our whatever home we want.
Actually, it's easier than that, and it's funny because I don't know if I've talked about this before on the show. I don't think I have yet. Is people like to go back and talk about how, civil rights, human rights completely aside. Just economically, how the American family did back in the 50s, etc. Right? That wealth,
white American families,
white American
Thank
families.
you, yes.
That wealth gap in white America wasn't the same.
That's correct.
But what they don't acknowledge about that time period is that there very much was a pay cap built into the tax system. Once you made over a certain amount of money, everything you made over that got taxed at like 99%.
Yeah, that's crazy. Wow.
That's why there wasn't that giant wealth gap in white America.
It's the tax codes. It's the erosion of our tax laws.
It was that erosion of our tax laws that really started creating that. But when you look back and people want to talk about, it was this and that. No, what did that was we had a pay cap. You couldn't make just this unlimited amount of money without having a significant portion of it taxed and that going back into society.
And why did we have that, Cody? I mean, I want to answer my own question, but I feel like the reason why we did was because Americans at our core, and this goes deep, deep, deep into who we are as a people, okay, culturally, we do not believe in kings and queens. We do not believe in monarchs, and we do not believe in pinning something on something's chest and say, you're the order of this and this knighthood and this brotherhood and this sister. We decided against that as a country. So I don't know why we're stuck in that.
Well, there's a switch, right? And you can see it kind of in even just the way we make things, how that switched. It used to be ideally you made something that was great. It did what it did well. And it did it forever well.
Or a piece of furniture that you could sit on,
well
and
made,
it could be well made.
It was going to last.
Yep.
You bought one couch.
We all sound so old right now.
We do sound so
They used to make things better back in the day.
But because there was a different motivation, right? It was about making a quality product.
It was, yeah.
It was about, this is the very best thing that I could make. I'm going to make this thing. I'm going to make it the very best it could be. But now it's about making money. Right? Now it's not about making the best product. It's about how do we make the most money off of this product. And in a lot of ways, making that product last forever and do something too good doesn't make sense. And
then you don't get paid again.
That's right. Why have somebody buy it once when they can buy it 14 times?
Okay, but have y'all seen these? Speaking of capitalism, have you seen these Stanley cups that are these pink ones that are selling for like $350?
I saw one go through like an explosion or something, and I wanted one really badly.
I know, but would you pay $300? But no, but like $350 because it's like a limited edition pink, and people are buying it. We will do that. So yeah, like that is what's been programmed into us.
But a big part of that switch is the way people began to see their value, right, and measure their value.
Bring it, Cody.
because kind of in line with that was, what value did you bring to society? Right? What did you bring? That was your value, was how you benefited your community and all those around you. That's where your value was found, was how you benefited society. But now value is found and acknowledged, and people emulate people that are valued in this way. Now value is found in how you have manipulated society into benefiting you. How much have you got out of society? Not much how have you given into society.
How much have you accumulated?
But how much have you got out of it?
Yeah.
And that switch and the motivations switch that causes, right? Because it's a very different, totally different mindset and strategy.
Yeah.
Right? One is, what can I do to put into society? How much can I give society? Totally different strategy than how much can I take?
I wonder if this is what's led to the Karen phenomenon. Because if I think about this in something, a really simple microcosm, you go sit down in a restaurant, if you feel like you're supposed to take as much and society is there for you and you have this entitlement and that it's your job to do this, you may treat the people who are serving you in a certain way because you don't value them. You only value you only value what it should be or what I am owed.
Well, I'm paying for it.
Versus that yes, I'm paying for it. Versus the idea that I am sitting down and I'm being served by my countrymen, by my brother, my sister, by my sibling, by this person who is no better or worse. And I think that it comes down to sometimes how do we relate to the world and how do we relate to value.
And it really is that switch from giver to taker.
Well,
because that's why it's built bad too, right? Is it's not about I'm making something or inventing something that's going to give a bunch to society. It's how can I invent it to take as much?
Well, it's the expectation because I'm paying for so I'm out. I'm doing so well in my life that I can go out and take my family out to a nice dinner. And I'm spending my hard-earned money at a local establishment and treating my family to a night out to dinner. And so you look at the person serving you in that they're in servitude of you because you're paying for this, right? And so instead of, like Cody said, instead of looking at them going, wow, this is your job. You're working hard. I worked in service and in the food service industry. And I mean, when I was younger, I loved waiting tables. It was great money. It was cash in my hand. I didn't take any work home with me. And so when we go out to eat, like we want to go to places where we enjoy good food. And yes, I want to, if I'm paying for good food, I want to receive good food, right? But I never treat my server poorly. And I know if I want to be friends with somebody, I go out to eat with people to know if I want to be friends with them. Mm-hmm. How you treat the server tells me everything I need to know about you.
That's true.
Well, and it's funny because you find that dynamic more with people like, usually people that have been servers and stuff, they treat them
or other
well.
Service jobs, yeah.
Other service jobs. Hardworking people treat hardworking people well.
Yeah.
But what's funny is most of the time you have, I'm spending my hard-earned money and it should be perfect and all of that. That's coming from people that have the money to spend, which is when you look at value and what something really costs, right? For somebody that makes less money, that taking my family out someplace special costs me a whole lot more, right? Like if you got the money to spare, it doesn't really cost you anything.
Yeah. How many people order water now when they go to a restaurant? Because ordering a soda
is like $5.
Is $5, and that's ridiculous. Like, we all know how sodas are dispensed in restaurants in the bagged soda carbonation machines, and we have watched. Like just that taking advantage, that consumerism.
Yeah, I think that the setting that you created just now, like, also turns the people into a prop.
Yeah,
and and I was talking to my son today because he's doing DoorDash. And it becomes even more that way, a prop, when people are door dashing because they don't even tip door dashers.
Oh my gosh, I tip my door dashers so good.
And I'm like, they're not just bringing it from the kitchen to your table. They're bringing it from one city to the next.
Yes.
And, and it just erases all of the restaurants.
Wow. Yeah.
And, and the driver and the whole situation.
Yeah.
And it just becomes here's my dinner.
Well, they
served to me.
Yep. That I can eat on my couch in the comfort of my home.
Right.
And they say, oh, well, the company they pay them an hourly wage. Like, so they justify because they're not being served that food. Whereas me, like, oh my gosh, I tip my DoorDash and Uber Eats drivers really well because I'm like, I am too lazy to leave my house. And you are not only going to bring me my banchan, but you're also going to stop at 7-Eleven and get me 2 pints of ice cream because I'm allowed to add that to my order in the last 7 minutes. And I love you for that. But I do notice how so many people don't have that attitude. So it has become it's been woven into just another thing that's been woven into the fabric of our culture now.
I think it's not even, to me, I don't see it as a weave, even though that's accurate. It's not inaccurate. I think it's an erosion.
Oh,
because these
yeah,
are edifices
100%,
that to me seem to predate my existence as an American.
Sure.
I see it nested in each generation in different ways. That is, what is value? Do we value the people in this country? We talk about the power from the people, all sorts of things, democracy, the demos, all those ideas. And I think that we all want to hearken to these ideas. You hear it in conservative mentality, talking about meritocracy, even the pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. Ugh. And all of that's rooted in a very similar Protestant work ethic, an American work ethic, an idea that comes culturally and socially, that cross-cuts social because it's been so ingrained in the Americanization process, the becoming an American process. And then we see also at the turn of the 20th century, the end of it, there's this sort of shift towards, like you said, Cody, accumulating, taking everything. I get all of mine as much as like greed is good, almost a Gordon Gekko type thing, right? And the big discussion, I think, beyond all of this is: are we going to value capital? Are we going to value people? Are we going to value reproduction? Are we going to value families? Are we going to value a number? Are we going to value a feeling? And I think that when we come down to it, all of this, if we treat the servers who serve us, or if we go in and we are the people who are serving someone, treating that person like an equal, it's not just an abstract idea. It's something that we live every day. And that's something that makes us different than a lot of other places in the world, and something I'm proud of. Yeah. But also as we get further and further away, and as you brought up also, Cody, as we get in a more and more scarce society, we're all pushed further and further to our limits. We're struggling to survive. These things become more and more loaded for us. They become more expensive, and the expense literally in dollars starts to accumulate into our feelings because we don't have. When you go out to a public place, you don't get acknowledged. Right. Especially as a trans person. I'll be lucky if I get acknowledged if I go into a grocery store. But even before I transitioned, the idea that people would say hi to you, that you would know the person there, the disconnect that happens. And I think that is the erosion of value in those community spaces, in the public spaces, and in people. But I digress. Yeah. Jessica, what do you think about value under a capitalist system?
I think that a lot of it comes with the hustle culture. Like we always have to be doing, we always have to be achieving, we always have to be getting. And I am a huge advocate for rest is resistance. Like take your break,
it's really hard. We have been so ingrained. Yes. Rest is resistance.
Yeah. And, and it's
guilt,
one of those things that like I've been in school for 6 years, so it feels weird at this point. It's a little surreal. Yeah. But the first few years, I had to have my homework. I had to be, a straight A student, 4.0, and, and all of this. And by the time I got to the last couple of years, I was very intentional about taking my weekends. Like, if I had a specific deadline coming up, okay, I might work on it. But my weekend is my weekend. And, and both my family both work in the service industry. And so, they have weird off days, and I always had the weekend. So like, that's it. That's my rest time. And it was by far the most productive semesters I had because when you're intentional about your rest, you're intentional about your work. Yep. Oh, wow. And, and I think that there's just so much of this hustle culture. Like you gotta do, you gotta be, you gotta, and we forget in that we are humans. Right.
Well, because we're not, none of the actual structures, whether it's government or corporations, none of those are built really in any way that acknowledge us as humans. I mean, who do you think you are to the government? Do you think you're Jessica, or do you think you're your social security number?
Right.
Because I promise you, your
Social
social security number, and that
Yeah.
social security number is actually hooked to how much money you've generated over your lifetime. And they could get loans and certain other resources attached
Credit.
to that number.
Exactly. And that
based on your-
value comes with hours worked.
That's
and
Mm-hmm.
how much money you have in savings. And, you know.
and
like,
that rolls right down to the corporations too. You know, it's one of the things, you know, as a manager, I had to explain it to one of my employees recently, because you have people that miss work, right? And in their mindset at that level, well, that just means you don't have to pay me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, you always have but other people had this, the work was still there. Other people had to do it, but there's actually so much more to it than that. The company gets so many different insurance breaks, tax breaks, according to how many people it actually has working full-time hours, and those hours actually being worked. And all of those things play into this larger net of money and funding, which is why, even though you don't have to pay you for those few hours you didn't show up, whether or not you actually show up is so important to the person 3 levels above me. Because even in that, you're not so-and-so, your employee number so-and-so, and that is attached to all of these different things, which is also attached to financing and stuff that the corporation can borrow on based on their employees and full-time employees and what those benefit, all of that is attached to it.
The
And they don't
labor
keep track
they
of all of my
produce.
like elementary school, middle school records, right? Because that's the stuff I was worried about growing
Yeah,
up.
all that stuff that went on your permanent record, that doesn't matter. It's just how
My
much money you're
son's
making.
biggest
Doesn't
fear in
matter.
high school was audited for taxes.
I'm still afraid of that. What a
Like
smart
he's
child.
like,
It's the
I'm
worst.
so
I've been through
scared
one.
that they're not teaching us about taxes, and I'm going to be audited.
Oh my gosh.
Like, stop, you're so cute.
I
Yes,
know,
good job.
right? You're so
Hopefully one day you'll make enough money for that to mean anything.
I know.
Take
I
them
know,
all of
right?
15 minutes to audit
Yep.
me, and
Oh,
if I missed everything, I still only owe them $20. So.
listen, the IRS is ruthless, but my 23-year-old is always like, you know, saying what their safety, keeps them not in a panic attack about money, and like, it makes me proud because it's actually very high, and I was like, and this is where she'll be like, she texted me before we started the show. You going to Sam's Club anytime soon? And I'm just like, I need to make a stop. And I'm like, she's not on our account, but I'll take her with me. And I'm like, yeah, we can go tomorrow. And I know what happens, because this is also, Mom will buy me things. I have these things that I need, but I know that if I want that animal crackers jar or the big thing of cheese balls, that Mom will also buy this for me. And I'm probably getting close to my like low limit on what is acceptable for her. But like literally for me, when I was her age at 23, I was just like, oh my God, can I just have $150 in the bank? You know? Right? And now kids are like, if my bank account gets below $2,000, I'm afraid. And I'm like, what? When did you ever have $2,000?
Like, if my bank account hits $2,000,
Listen, right? I was like,
I'm
man,
going to throw a party.
Go to the thrift store.
I
A
know.
$2,000 party.
Capitalism.
It's
I'm
also a
telling you.
consequence of growing up. But like any child,
It
like
is.
anyone who's an adult now, anyone who grew up through the recessions and the 9/11. I mean, depending on which generation you fall into, like it's $5 for a Coke, $10 for a coffee.
Yeah.
You know,
I remember
$15 for a
99 cent
fast
gas.
food
Yes.
meal. It's like you better have $2,000 at the bank.
Right? I remember all that. So yeah, I mean it's rough. And then actually speaking on capitalism, how do we feel about all these corporations capitalizing, you know, the targets on during Pride Month and things like that? What do we I feel, because I do love awareness, however, capitalism.
I think it's gross.
Yeah.
Personally, I think it's real gross
Yep.
the way they do that. And more than the targets and stuff like that, like it is what it is, and we have to contend with that, is the people that create the fast fashion and then advertise it
Yes.
all over our social medias.
Shein
And it's like, oh, yes, absolutely. I want stuff to wear to Pride, and I want stuff to, and it's just like, where even is that money going?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then,
know?
that money, you know where that money is going ultimately? Into a giant flaming pile of trash in the middle of our ocean.
Yeah.
That's where it's going. Or burn pits in Africa. And we're just ruining the environment for people in Africa. That's where all that's going.
And and I've learned this just through TikTok, there's lots of small businesses and people out there that you can get your Pride stuff and all that stuff from.
You have your Etsy shoppers and things like that.
Yeah, there's lots of Etsy places, different creators on places like Redbubble and things like that.
And I love that. And as much as I say that's gross about
of course,
that, like complete opposite of these small businesses and Etsy's and creators that are like, I support these people. I love these people, whatever.
And, getting it's the same concept that I saw back, in my earlier 20s, getting a handmade sustainable bamboo shirt from a small business owner that made that shirt, very different than buying a I'm green t-shirt from Walmart.
Right. Yeah.
But
yes,
we face the issue of Walmart's stuff is cheap. It's
Yep.
affordable.
It's affordable.
And the homemade stuff is not always affordable.
Yep.
And, and so that's kind of the problem that they're capitalizing on.
That's absolutely right.
You can buy 5 of these t-shirts for the price of that one. But now we're supporting a small business as opposed to Target.
Well, and that's really people don't, when we talk about capitalism, what people don't acknowledge about capitalism is that it's not a fair market. We use the word fair market, but that's not how capitalism works. Capitalism is based on competition.
We're in late stage capitalism right now. Which is bad.
We all know how I feel about competition. It is not competition does not breed progress.
That is
competition only is a way to measure progress at best, but it doesn't breed progress. Collaboration breeds progress. But capitalism is a competition-based philosophy. What that means is somebody's going to win.
And
there will be a winner and there will be a loser. That's how a competition works. And at some point, all of the money will go to one place. That's the point of the game. As that happens more and more and more, the fair market becomes less and less fair. Right? Because say I even have a good idea. Right now, in today's society, I have an amazing idea that I'm going to invent. It's going to change everybody's life. All right? But I still got to find resources to build that idea. I got to source them. I got to find somebody that's going to provide those to me.
Yep.
All right. Now, because I'm just starting out, I'm not buying their resources in bulk. So those resources are going to cost me more.
Right.
I'm also going to have to find somebody with the facilities and the structure to take those resources and turn them into something. All right. Now, if I have a really, really good idea that somebody else wants, well, guess what?
Sell them a portion of your...
If Pepsi is already paying you billions of dollars to bottle their stuff, and they tell you not to bottle mine, and I was only going to pay you 10 grand, you're going to say, okay, I won't bottle your stuff.
And
so I may have the best soda pop in the world, but what's going to happen is Pepsi's going to come to me and say, hey, look, your soda's great, but you're never going to get anybody to drink it.
And you can't
You're never going to be able to make enough of it. You're
Shark
never going to be
Tank.
able to put it in a bottle. You're never going to be able to put it on somebody's shelf. But you just sell it to us, we'll do all of that.
Or worse, you sell it to them and then they don't do. Because one thing that you bring to mind is the number of ideas, innovations. Because we talk about capitalism, the great innovation engine of America.
Yeah.
But think about all of the amazing ideas that are sitting in the patent offices that are owned by different people who sit on them because it would destroy competing marketplace and market sectors.
Yep.
And that's the back end of the bell curve, so to speak.
Right.
There were solar panels on the White House in the 70s.
Yeah, right.
There were solar panels on the White House in the 70s. Do you know why there's not solar energy and renewable energy running most of the country?
Ronald Reagan?
People still buy
Burn in
oil
hell, Ronald Reagan. What?
because there's still oil to sell.
Oh, because there's
Now
no
it's
other
gas.
stuff,
Oh my
right?
gosh,
Why-
we're like a net
why would-
exporter?
Why would you replace something when you can still still got this to sell?
We still have
Now
this to sell.
you run out of oil to sell. I promise you, there'll be windmills and solar panels on everything.
They'll be burning bodies before they do that.
They
I'm just
will.
kidding. I digress.
Yeah,
It's so
I know
negative.
we do.
We
I
just
know.
hit
We need to
40.
wrap this up. I know.
We need to wrap it up.
But it has been really a pleasure having you,
Absolutely.
and
Thank
would
you.
love to talk to you again. I think you're wonderful. I love what you're
Likewise.
doing. I think everybody feels that way.
I very much enjoyed attending your course, your
Awesome.
class.
Thank you. Cool.
And how can our listeners support you and support the work at 757 Trans Family?
I would say reach out and talk to me about being another parent for people to reach out to. I don't have like any kind of funding at this point set up because I'm still new. So if anybody wants to help with that, that'd be dope.
Cash up.
Sponsors hear it. Grant makers hear it.
But yeah, just reach out through social media. And one of my biggest things is connecting organizations and resources with people. And so anytime they reach out, if I don't have an answer, I lead them to something else. So just reach out.
That's
Social
great.
media, I'm always on it. Always on it.
Yay.
All right.
I have 5
Thank
different
you.
social media Instagram pages. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
always on.
All right. Well,
You heard
good.
Miss Jessica Gurley. Go find 757transfamily.com and all their different locations out on social media. Follow and send a message. And if there's anything else that we need to talk about tonight,
Not tonight.
I guess
No, I mean, we could talk about anything forever.
I
Like
know,
that
we
squirrel
could,
picture
but
over
yeah.
there. I've been looking at that squirrel picture for
The silly goose.
hour and a half
I
straight.
know.
Silly
My
goose.
squirrel. Isn't it cute?
And I'm trying to decide if he's panicking because the nuts are falling away or because the nuts are coming at him. That's been the...
subscribe to our Patreon to see the image. We'll share the image of the squirrel.
Thank you for joining us once again. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as we did.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right, Cody, do you have anything clever to say to close us out?
Bye.
Bye.
Talking Transparency is brought to you by the Kalos Coalition. Our theme music is by SKS. If you enjoyed the show, please check us out on all the socials at talkingtransparency.com or check out our link tree at Talking Trans. Visit our website at talkingtransparency.com and please consider supporting us at patreon.com/talkingtransparency.